I am very grateful to Chadwick, because he was the only person who encouraged me. On many a day, when there were no crowds or much work to be done at the ashram, he would make me sit next to him and narrate a thrilling incident. I did not know then that after narrating each incident, he was going to his room and noting it down in a notebook. In 1958, I went away from Tiruvannamalai to take a 2-year postgraduate course in philosophy. Before I left, Chadwick told me, "Thank you. I have noted all of these reminiscences in a notebook." After my post-graduation, I worked for a few months and came back in 1960 to live in Ramanashramam. The very first thing that I did was to go straight to Chadwick's room and tell him, "Give me your prasad, that notebook in which you have written everything." This notebook of Chadwick's was the first book of reminiscences that was published. A few days after the book was released, I received a letter of thanks from Chadwick, in which he wrote, "There is no tradition in our ashram to dedicate the book to a person of one's choice. For every book is an offering to Bhagavan, Ramanarpanamastu, dedicated to the holy feet of Sri Bhagavan. If there would have been such a custom, I would certainly have dedicated this book to you, dear Ganesan." By that time, I had become so close to the old devotees that another person, G.V. Subbaramaya, listened to me and said, "I am writing my reminiscences in my mother tongue, Telugu." I replied, "What is the use if you write it only in Telugu? You are an English professor. Translate it into English too." This was the second book of reminiscences. He had it published outside. I pleaded with him and subsequently got its future editions published by Ramanashramam. A cascade of reminiscences followed. T.K. Sundaresa Iyer's At the Feet of Bhagavan, Devaraj Mudaliar's My Recollections of Bhagavan Sri Ramana, Sudhi Nagama's My Life at Sri Ramanashramam, and then those of Kunju Swami, Balarama Reddyar, and Kanakamal. The spiritual food was theirs. I was the lucky one, blessed to be the spoon that served it to hungry spiritual seekers. No doubt it was Bhagavan's grace that such things should happen. If the teachings of the Buddha, Jesus Christ, and Sri Ramakrishna were not recorded by their chosen devotees and disciples, how could we have known them? If these reminiscences about Bhagavan Ramana are with us today, it is primarily thanks to Chadwick, and then to all the other devotees who acceded to my fervent and persistent pleas to record them. These books of reminiscences bring out the relationship between a Satguru and his surrendered disciples. They are very precious because the true stories contained in them bring the teaching closer to us. How does one put that verbal teaching into practice? We need a lot of encouragement to practice the verbal teaching. Otherwise, one Bible, one Quran, and one Bhagavad Gita would have been enough. That is why the reminiscences of these old devotees, how they lived with the Master, and how the Master, through his pure living, taught the truth, is important to us. Chadwick had a unique relationship with the Master. Tell me what Bhagavan looked like when you saw him and moved with him. What was it that struck you most? When I asked him this, his reply was the same that he wrote later in his reminiscences. Bhagavan was a very beautiful person who shone with a visible light or aura. He had the most delicate hands I have ever seen with which he could express himself. One might almost say that he could talk with his hands. His features were regular, and the wonder of his eyes was famous. His forehead was high, and the dome of his head the highest I have ever seen. In India, this is known as the Dome of Wisdom, and it was only natural that it should be so with our beloved Bhagavan. His body was well formed and of only medium height, but this was not apparent as his personality was so dominant that one looked upon him as tall. He had a great sense of humor, and while talking, a smile was never far from his face. He had many jokes in his repertoire and was a magnificent actor. He would always dramatize the protagonist of any story he related. When people came to him with their family stories, he would laugh with the happy and at times shed tears with the bereaved. In this way, he seemed to reciprocate the emotions of others always. He never raised his voice, and if he did occasionally seem angry, there was no sign of it on the surface of his piece. Talk to him immediately afterwards, and he would answer calmly and quite undisturbed. He did not speak incessantly and unnecessarily. His apparent silence only showed how much foolish chatter usually goes on among us. He preferred every sort of simplicity and preferred to sit on the floor, but a couch had been forced upon him, and this became his home for the most of the 24 hours of the day. He would never allow any preferences to be shown to him. He would wander out on the hill a few times a day, and if any attachment to anything on earth could be said of him, it was surely an attachment to the hill. He loved it and said it was God himself. Chadwick moved closely with Bhagavan. He did not take any action, simple, small, or big, without consulting Bhagavan. Although Bhagavan never approved or disapproved verbally, all the old devotees of Bhagavan could tell from Bhagavan's expression what his response was. If he approved, he would nod his head. If he disapproved, he would go into his royal silence. Once, Chadwick had a bad toothache. In those days, Pondicherry was the closest town where one could find a good dentist. He went and told Bhagavan, "Bhagavan, I have a very bad toothache. May I go to Pondicherry to have a dentist treat it?" There was that royal silence, and Chadwick did not go. Within 3 days, his toothache miraculously disappeared. He told me, "One should always be in tune with the master. His answer is there. It doesn't have to be a verbal yes or no. If you adhere to that, then even if his answer is in the negative, a positive action of healing flows from it."
As we saw earlier, Chadwick followed a strict regimen of meditating, reading spiritual books, and sitting in front of Bhagavan for long periods of time. A 6'2" man, he could not sit cross-legged for long on the floor and used to struggle. Observing this, Bhagavan advised him to have a meditation belt. In his reminiscences, Chadwick writes about wearing a cotton meditation belt around his body while sitting on the floor, keeping his knees vertical. With it, he didn't have to recline on the wall or stretch his legs. He could sit for hours on the floor without any problem. From then on,